they need that open ground, that early succession, and they like that, and they are much more general about what that needs to look like structurally in terms of the composition and actual structure. So those pastures for adult turkeys or older age poults is probably it's not ideal, but
Yeah.
it's fine, and it's better than having a bunch of cluttered mid-story of hardwood forests.
Mm-hmm.
But don't forget that that same exact location would be a death sentence for a 7-day-old poult.
Right.
Welcome to Wild Turkey Science, a podcast made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow. I'm Dr. Marcus Lashley, Professor of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Florida.
And I'm Dr. Will Goolsby, Professor of Wildlife Ecology and Management at Auburn University. We're both lifelong hunters and devoted scientists who are passionate about hunting, managing, and researching wild turkeys.
In this podcast, we'll explore turkey research, speak to the experts in the field, and address the difficult questions related to wild turkey ecology and management.
Our goal
is to serve as your connection to wild turkey science.
Do you know what I just realized? We have not been recording this whole time.
You didn't just realize that. I mean, we've been talking for an hour and 18 minutes at this point about what we're going to talk about.
I know. And we haven't come up with a defined plan yet. I thought I'd force the issue by clicking go. And let's see where we go.
Yeah. Well, where do you want to go?
Well, I was thinking, we're in the middle of the summer. It's hot here, and you were telling me how cold it is there.
Yeah, we set a high temperature, a low high temperature record in Montgomery yesterday.
Yeah.
The high was 75 degrees on August 4th.
The Poults aren't going to be panting.
So no, they will
good
not.
For them.
No,
good for them.
But they probably appreciated if they had any fields that they could have gone out and brooded in that morning, so they could get a little sunshine on their backs.
No fields, huh? No fields. They were like, all right, the weather's here, but we got nowhere to eat. Yeah. Well, the reality is turkey science isn't very popular at this time of year, so we needed something. We needed something clickbaity. So.
Yeah.
I think Charlotte should just name the episode.
This is clickbait.
This episode is clickbait.
I wonder if our average our downloads will go up or down in response to that. I don't know. I could see it.
Well, I think we're going to see, because that's what's about to happen.
At least for being honest.
Yeah. Well, in seriousness, we actually the last, I don't know, handful of episodes have been fairly popular. The ones that we've had that were habitat-centric in particular, the ones that are practical.
Yeah.
We definitely had a few people that didn't care for the fire breaks, or at least some of the stuff we shared in that, and a lot of other people that really liked that and appreciated it.
Yeah. Well, I will say in response to that I agree with the listener that a bare mineral soil fire break is best.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that you have to have that in every instance, though.
Well, and I think where I would double down, a green fire break can be effective, but not all green fire breaks are.
Agreed.
So, and I talked about raking the thatch out of the bahia and how that's common practice in some places. Well, I think that is another thing, like mowing vegetation down and then having a bunch of dead thatch is not going to be a good fire break.
No.
It'll burn right across that often.
I would agree with that.
So the bare mineral soil is definitely best. But, yeah, so, and we've had a few other episodes that are habitat-centric that people seem to really appreciate, and we did one on, just some of the stuff that we're seeing on landowners' properties that we're visiting that have been, showing us some hope that people are getting it and really getting stuff done.
Right.
So, I thought we could continue on with that, and let's, talk about some things that people can be doing right now, other than sitting at the river.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably a pretty good idea, to be honest.
I like that.
Yeah.
I do. So, speaking of river, I was in northern Michigan here this past week. So, I don't know if you remembered that, but my in-laws.
Tell us what the weather was like.
It's about like it is in Auburn, Alabama, apparently.
Oh, was it?
A high.
Oh, you mean okay.
Yeah. Would you say the high was in the 70s or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like that. And I was, I really like trout fishing. So I was on the river every day. And I had gotten a kayak. So I have started trying my best to fly fish while kayaking down the river.
Ooh.
And I can tell you that several people commended me on the talent it took to do that. And then I reminded them that I was trying to do it, that I have not actually mastered accomplishing it. And I had lost about half of my flies and dropped my fly rod in the river 2 or 3 times. And, various other mishaps. It was real difficult, but man, I had a good time.
Yeah. So, I've been trying to fish out of a kayak lately too.
Really?
Small world, yeah. We got a couple of kayaks recently just to take out on our local lake, Yeah. And I also have been trying to master a bait caster. I've always, fished with spinning gear primarily. And so I switched over to a bait caster for bass this year. And I'm still terrible at that, but it brings a new element. It brings a new element to it for me,
Well, and that's kind of, one thing I really loved about fishing out of the kayak is that you're getting to explore the entire river, for a long segment.
Yeah.
And that I like, but I also am so bad at fishing that way.
Yeah.
That I was constantly like retying and, just like one thing after another because it's hard to maintain the direction of the boat. You got to make sure that you're pointing downstream, because if you hit a rock or a log or something, you're going to tump over because you're moving fast, So I'm not getting to fish a lot of the good holes because I've lost my flies on the limb that was hanging back, right up the river from it. So, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, even with the traditional tackle, I feel like it's taken me like 10 minutes to change over a lure. It's just cumbersome to be in the kayak and try to get the tackle out and cut one off and tie one on.
Well, it's hard enough just to like sit in the damn thing, make it go somewhere.
Yeah.
But adding the fast moving stream to the mix.
I haven't dealt with that element.
2 or 3 people told me, they were like, hell, I try to just kayak down the river or just fly fish, and I can't do either one well. How are you doing both? And I'm like, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not doing it well. So, but it was a lot of fun. But one of the episode, I guess the topic of the day, so to speak, I had a really interesting interaction up there, and it kind of got with turkeys. So we're back to turkeys now.
Yeah, okay.
So for all those that hate our banter up front, we're back. Oh, and by the way, I feel compelled to say Charlotte, who obviously is super important to this ship here in making sure that we are pointed down the river and continue on. She has let us know that it's really hard for some of our listeners to listen through all of this. So she's going to do a solid and try to make sense of everything and put in, what are they called? Like a stop tag, or what's that thing called?
I don't know. Let's call them bookmarks.
Yeah, she's going to bookmark when the banter's over for those that don't like listening to us, so that you can just skip through to where the good stuff starts.
They don't like us personally. They just want to use us for our knowledge.
Unfortunately, she's going to test that out on this episode where the good part may never start. So if you don't see a tag in this one, it's because there wasn't anywhere for her to put it. So back to the topic at hand. Which chapter are we in now? I think we're still in the monologue.
Squarely in middle age, Marcus.
Yeah. I think we're in the credits section right now or something. So anyway, this interaction with turkeys got me thinking, because I was like, wow, when I saw these turkeys, I was like, what are they doing? So then I started trying to figure out what they were doing. And when I figured out what they were doing, it made me realize, wow, that's something that people really should be doing. They should be thinking about that right now. So that's kind of back full circle to what our episode's about. I wanted for us to talk about some things that people should be thinking about or potentially even implementing on their property for turkeys right now.
Okay.
So, do you want me to start with that?
Yeah.
Since I've already kind of introduced the one. So, yeah, when I was up in northern Michigan, there was a landowner that was cutting hay. And, they had cut it one of the days I was there, and then they were tedding it, and then they rode it up. And on the morning I was leaving, they had it all in rows, basically, where they're going to go in and bundle it. And I saw, I'm coming around the curve, and I'm literally headed out to come back home. And I see a blob of black up there in the hay. And I get up closer and closer, and you can probably count. We'll put the footage on YouTube for folks, and you can see how many. But when I get up, I realize it's two hens with two sized poults. So it's two broods. Both hens have their brood, but they've come together. And I mean, there must have been 15, 16, 18. I don't know. I haven't actually gone in and counted it, but there were a ton of poults with these two hens. And they're just feeding around. They're literally walking down the rows, like flipping them over and scratching and catching bugs and stuff. And I thought, now what is this landowner doing? Like, this is a terrible place to brood, but obviously these two hens have pulled it off. And then I just kind of started looking around, and I looked kind of over, maybe 25, 30 yards past them, and they had a field border there. And then that field border, when I got up to it, I looked at it, and it was a really good looking old field structure with a bunch of forb species. The structure was just really good. And I started noticing they've got these field borders kind of intertwined, mixed through there. And then I get up to the wood line, and there's some openings in the woods, and the structure under it looked really good for brooding. And I was thinking, yeah, that's what people need to be doing right there. Like, if a lot of people are in that setting, right? That, the land, it's a working landscape. A lot of people want to have some hay, or they've got pastures for some reason, or, some other land use.
Deer food plots.
Yeah, that, you don't necessarily want to dedicate to turkeys, but taking some actions like this landowner did, where they have some deliberate field borders. And I think it looked like some of them were just odd areas where they were having a hard time planting it, but they had still disked it. So the plant community was really good in it from a brooding standpoint. And then, obviously this is an anecdote, and I don't know, I can't tie the success of those hens to that, but it did make me realize, oh, okay, they're not just trying to raise a brood in this hayfield. They actually have some really good brooding cover all around them in the, these field borders and these woods. And it made me think about the timing, because right now I got to watch those animals right there in it. And, people are in their side by side, and apparently they're bundled up where you're at, and they're sweating down here where I'm at. But, it's a good time to be out there and understand where the good cover is, and even see animals use it potentially. But it's a good time to plan for stuff like that, to try to be deliberate about using those areas, those odd areas, if you have competing land uses, and maybe you're on a lease and you can't do anything with some of the landscape because it's trees or agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about deliberately managing those odd areas can be really effective and productive. And now is a good time to evaluate where those can be and how effective they currently are.
Yeah, and I feel that I find that a lot of landowners just bush hog those, and they're doing it just to keep it from becoming young forest.
Yeah,
and instead you could be
it's
putting it
just
to
an
work.
aesthetic.
Yeah, but I think that something else that you bringing that up that I think is important for people to keep in mind too is that hayfield can actually provide some fairly good breeding cover at this point in the summer, but I would predict that those field borders that were more forb dominated would have been better when those poults were particularly young,
Mm-hmm.
and vulnerable.
Well, that's one thing, I think if you saw the video clip, the Poults we're at an age now where they're not real, they're not adult turkeys, but
Right.
they're not in that critical window where they're
Right.
super vulnerable to everything that happens.
So they can be a
around
little
them.
bit more generalist now.
Yeah, and this is like, people that see the Poults and the Bahia pasture or whatever, fescue, brome, whatever you got, that where they're not in good cover, but they're still effective.
Yeah.
They were kind of in that stage where, they're chicken-sized Poults.
Yeah.
That are less restricted to particular types of plant communities to be safe and effective.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't like there were a bunch of 1 week old out in the hay pasture. So, but I think you're exactly right. They probably were really effective in that part of their life stage because they had those field borders that were really good for that first 2 weeks that is really critical.
Mm-hmm.
And once they get a little bit older, they can much more utilize the other things that are going on in the landscape.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point to discuss too, because it's something that you and I have talked about. It's something that I recently talked about with Craig Harper while he was down visiting and we were doing a habitat workshop. But it's that, we see these turkeys out, particularly during the kind of late summer and then back around in spring again, using fields, especially like cow pastures and hay fields pretty regularly. And that indicates to us that that's good turkey habitat, right? If you just go by, the casual observer would think, I see turkeys in that field all the time. That must be a good place for turkeys, right? I think, and this is the conversation you and I have had and the one that I had with Craig more recently, I think that what that indicates to me and what I think about when I see that is just how important having early successional cover is to turkeys.
Yeah.
And in many places, the only early successional cover that they have is in those pastures and hay fields.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a landscape that has that, even if it's a Bahia grass or a Bermuda grass or a fescue grass pasture, is potentially better turkey habitat than a landscape that doesn't have it. But that being said, if your objective, and in some cases, like you just brought up, turkeys are being managed on working lands. And if that land has to be pasture or that land has to produce hay, then there's nothing wrong with that land use by all means.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's your land, do what you want.
Yeah, that's their livelihood.
Exactly. But if you're not in that boat and you own land that, where turkeys are a priority or a management priority, I take that information and I know, okay, these open areas are clearly really important to turkeys. We see them use them all over the landscape. So let's create or maintain the ones that we have. And if we want to keep them open, we're going to have to disturb them. So let's disturb them in such a way that we make that plant community even more ideal, right? So I think at the surface level, it's important to have open ground for turkeys, as evidenced by the fact that they use these pastures and hay fields. But if we're actually trying to be intentional about maximizing turkey abundance and we don't have a competing working lands objective, let's keep that land open and manage the vegetation structure and species composition to produce the most bugs, insect, and quality structure to keep these birds alive and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the way that I've started thinking about this.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it. And one thing I'll add that it was making me think of is we also need to remember, and I think when you interjected on, and added this when I was discussing that field border thing, it was warranted for sure. What is available and important varies quite a bit by life stage.
Sure.
So what I mean when I wanted to bring this back up, when you were talking about that pasture and them using it, that they need that open ground, that early succession, and they like that, and they are much more general about what that needs to look like structurally in terms of the composition and actual structure. So those pastures for adult turkeys or older age poults is probably
pretty good.
It's not ideal, but
Yeah.
it's fine, and it's better than having a bunch of cluttered mid-story of hardwood forest.
Mm-hmm.
So you see them out in it, and they're also highly visible at the same time. Craig
Mm-hmm.
loves to point out that you
That's
can
part
see
of
them
it.
there.
Yeah, you just see them there.
So they're really easy to find there. But don't forget that same exact location would be a death sentence for a 7-day-old poult.
Right.
So that's kind of what I wanted to remind people, having that other cover would be much more productive because it gets them through that bottleneck. And then they are more general by the time they get to the age of these ones that I just saw. They're much less vulnerable to those nuances and structure and everything. Much more effective hunters, they kind of have gotten through the gauntlet.
They're taller, stronger legs, better thermoregulation.
Yeah, less vulnerable to a suite of predators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're flighted.
Yeah, so we've got, while they were obviously using that field just fine, 3 or 4 weeks before that, they would not have been able to use that field just fine if it looked, the same.
Right. It's an important point. Yeah, another thing that I think about doing this year for turkeys, during this time of the year in general in August, I mean, you can still spot spray. Spot spraying since we're already on the topic of field management, this is something that we've talked about a few times before. But just going out into those fields and places that you have, let's just say maybe too much native warm season grass, right? So we talk all the time about spraying invasive grasses, but sometimes I spray native warm season grasses. If I have a field that I'm specifically wanting to manage for brooding cover, and let's say it's gotten to the point where I estimate on average 60% of the horizontal coverage of that field is comprised of native warm season grass, I'll go around to several spots throughout that field and thin it out by spraying it. And then
I don't know if you saw it, but we did get a comment from somebody that was expressing that we don't give enough credit to the value of native warm season grasses.
Oh, really? I didn't see that one.
Yeah, I don't remember where it came in. It may not have been somewhere you could see it.
Okay.
But they were making the point that, a lot of our native warm season grasses are important, especially to carry fire.
Yeah.
Which
I agree with that.
Completely agree with.
I want some of them. I just don't want it to be dominated by native warm season grass.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and that old field context is different than, lonely pine.
Right.
Savanna.
That's true too. Yeah.
So, but even in that case, I don't necessarily want it to be 100% or 90%.
Right.
Native warm season grass.
Agreed.
Either, if my objectives are wildlife driven.
Agreed. Yeah. So, spot spraying. So I use native warm season grass as my first example, but obviously invasive stuff too. Even if you've done a broadcast application to get rid of pasture grass, you're still going to have to fight it for a while. You're going to have spots of it pop up here and there, spray that out. You got Johnson grass coming up, pigweed, the list goes on and on. You got dock or something like that. Just good time of the year to do that. Also potentially a good time to go ahead and take soil samples, for you're thinking about your amendments. So what are you going to do for this fall? Or if it's going to be a warm season crop, what are you going to do in spring? Getting close to the time of year to manage clover too. That's a big part of turkey management for a lot of people.
Well, let me ask you another thing that's sort of in line with what I was saying earlier, and I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, boy.
Then you can put me on the spot here in a minute if you want to counter me. So you've been out with a lot of landowners and doing a lot of work, and you've been doing that for years. What is something that you think, like sort of like that same sort of vibe, like, man, landowners really need to be thinking about this and trying to either plan or implement this thing? What comes to your mind first when I say that?
And
I'm talking about specifically, they want more turkeys got one. So
this is the thing that they need to be doing or planning. Question was planning?
Either one. I just want to know what came to your mind first.
I don't feel like this one's like a news flash or groundbreaking or anything like that, but it's hard to get what you need to burned a lot of times. And I feel like that's something that we put on the back burner, especially as fall start. Back burner, pun not intended. that we don't prioritize when fall's coming around and we start thinking about bow season, right? And we're not, burning can be the furthest thing from our mind right now, but we still get some good burn weather in the fall. And even if you don't have intentions to burn during the fall, or as we've pointed out several times and our listeners have pointed out to us, many places have burn bans in effect this time of year when you get into late summer, early fall, that transition period, because it does get really dry in most places or in many places. But thinking about, what work do I need to make sure that after deer season, because let's be honest, that's when most people are going to think about getting their burning done, that I'm prepared. And so let's get as much of that work out of the way as possible so that I'm not wasting a good burn day prepping a fire break, for example.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a long-term thought that I think a lot of people sometimes fail to plan for. And then the other one, I wasn't sure whether to answer with this one or the one the example I just gave, but the other one I think about too is planning timber harvest, because how long it can sometimes take from the time that you decide that you want to do something with a stand until you actually have loggers in the woods cutting it.
Yeah, that's a good one. Good point. Regarding the burning, I spend a lot of time with landowners sort of in this vein of discussion. It's one thing, like you were saying, to get prepped to make sure you're prepared when it's time to burn. And it's another thing to get in a mindset that every day is potentially a burn day. Now, obviously, if you're in a burn ban, that's not part of your burn window. But other parts in non-traditional times of the year certainly could be. And I think, what you're saying about being prepared to burn could just as easily go that way. Like, being prepared to burn also allows you to think that way and burn when you get the right weather.
Right.
Which might be very helpful if you're one of those people who is having a hard time meeting their burn acreage. And I think both of us, we had this discussion earlier, actually. Both of us agree that hitting our fire return interval, so in other words, meeting the frequency of fire on our land that we are trying to accomplish, is most important.
Right.
And then introducing other timing to meet specific objectives better or whatever it can be added to that, but the other way to look at it is expanding the burn window to other times of the year and starting to think about burning, any day being a burn day if you get the right set of conditions and everything. That can also help you meet that fire return interval more easily.
Right.
So it's not necessarily we're going to burn in fall because that's going to control hardwoods better.
Right.
That is a thing that we have observed in some of the studies and stuff we've been involved with, but it also might just help you get more acreage burned.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
So, I think that's an important part of the mindset. And, I spend a lot of time trying to get people in that mindset. And some landowners still look at me like, what are you talking about? We burn in February and March. That's what, what are you talking about burning in November?
Yeah.
No.
What about July?
Peak nesting.
Yeah.
That one's going to get at least one comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
So what else do you want to talk about? What was your...
Well, do you have like a list of top 3 things that need to be done
this time of year?
Any time of year. Don't limit yourself here.
Top 3 things. I mean, most of the properties that I go on, if I just had to summarize in one sentence what they need to increase turkey abundance, it would be more sunlight.
Sunlight to the
increasing sunlight to the ground. Yeah. And then because of what we talked about at the beginning of the episode, that stimulates the plants that turkeys use. And we know we want to maintain that as an opening now at this point, so we just start thinking about, well, what is the ideal composition and structure of that, and what are the management practices that I need to implement to get to that point?
Yeah. And that, I don't, maybe it's because I'm right in the middle of this Poult experiment and, literally I'm interacting with Poults on the day-to-day. Is that where your mind goes?
Where?
When we're talking about making the turkey population more productive, do you immediately go to Poults?
Yes.
So it's not just me?
No.
Okay.
I mean, are you surprised?
What do you mean?
I mean, we tend to spend a lot of time together and influence each other's thoughts. I don't know why.
What do you think that's because of me, or?
I think it's because we both worked through all the information that we worked through, and we've kind of arrived at that same conclusion.
That, we have the biggest bottleneck.
I mean, I'm essentially managing these properties for a month out of the year is what I'm really focused on heavily.
Yeah. Well, now spending time with Poults and watching them navigate, I mean, man, I'm so excited about our next year experiment. We're going to have 2 planted, like intentional planted composite communities, like agricultural plantings for Poults that we're evaluating compared to 2 native old field type communities in a specific composition that we're manipulating versus just having it in Ryegrass.
What are going to be the agronomic crops that you're planting?
I haven't settled on them yet, but it'll be broadly, forbs. But the mix will be forb. But it'll be agronomic forbs. So soybeans and cowpeas and, probably not vines.
Yeah. So
probably leave, the cowpeas, I guess, is a vine, but for a large portion of the time frame that we would be using it, it's not structured like it. But, something like lab, it's not really producing the kind of structure I want.
Yeah.
But I'm just really excited about it because, the reason I brought that up is because when you were saying it, I realized that all I'm thinking about is producing the cover for young Poults to make it through that.
Yeah.
And, it's also driving a lot of the work, and I'm super excited about that work, trying to optimize that and give people something, because I think, it's one thing that managing fields for poultry and cover, it's another thing we could get a whole suite of other people to plant that, like that they're just not willing or capable or frustrated with or whatever is keeping them from, whatever that barrier is, keeping them from managing for high quality cover. They might be willing to plant it instead, or be able to accomplish it easier.
I think that's a really good point. And just sharing some honest thoughts right now, like you said, we've worked with landowners for a long time, and that's really picked up for me, especially the past couple of years. And because of a lot of Craig's research on how to manage old fields, I have recommended his method of managing those old fields for turkeys, which generally starts out with a broadcast application of herbicide to eliminate exotic pasture grasses. And then from there, you move on to the spot spraying that we talked about earlier. And you just use that over time to shape species composition. Well, it's a lot easier for me to do that than it is for a landowner to do that, because, I teach plant identification, right? Like we have a leg up on that. That's our job, right? Passing along that information is really difficult, but I will say that it is possible. Landowners are doing it. And actually, in response to some of our recent episodes, I've been having landowners email and text me about plants that they're learning. And they've started taking that approach of just learning a couple here and there every so often, and they're building their portfolio of plant knowledge out so that they can be more effective in that regard. But we know that there's a lot of people that aren't going to do that, right? And it can be difficult. So,
another thing just to add to that, they don't want to do that. They want to plant something in that spot. They don't want to dedicate it to something else.
Exactly. And the way that I have been approaching that up until recently is trying to convince them not to plant. I don't know if that's the right way to move the needle.
Well, that's why I want to evaluate it, because we don't have any good data really.
And so
on the agronomic side.
And so to speak to that, for example, I have seen several properties where they've started planting recently. They've been around for a while now, but I feel like I don't know. I'd have to ask Bronson what the relative popularity is, but joint vetch, Agronomic, I feel like it's, kind of taken off. Like more and more people are aware that it's a good high protein summer deer forage that can withstand heavy browsing pressure, as opposed to other popular legumes like soybeans, cowpeas, lab, things like that.
I evaluated it as one of the forages in Tennessee when I was working on my master's with Craig. And I was like, that's a good plant.
Yeah.
And then I went to Mississippi and started working with Bronson, and we evaluated it there. And then we had, I don't remember what year it was probably 2016 or 17 in the fall. We had an extreme drought, and all of our cool season stuff failed.
Right.
And those things were a magnet for deer. The joint vetch that we had planted earlier in the year were the food plot program for that whole fall. And after that, I was like, I became a joint vetch fan for deer.
Absolutely.
And man, that, like, you could mow that. You could literally take a mower out there and mow it down like grass, and it'll take it like a champ.
Yep. And I've seen it in a lot of places where I've recommended people plant it for deer, where it had pretty dang good structure for turkey poults.
I've seen it. I usually don't see it in the structure that I would find most desirable, but I have seen it though.
Yeah, but the hard thing too about it is getting it in the ground and more importantly out of the ground early enough, so that it provides that good structure for poults. So Craig, in his book, I've got it right here, and I think it's out of print right now, but we've talked about it before, A Guide to Wildlife Food Plots and Early Successional Plants. He has a
Very popular
recommendation
book.
in there for a
Good
brooding
reason.
plot that includes 10 pounds of American joint vetch and 8 pounds of buckwheat per acre. And I've been working with a few landowners lately that have been trying that out as brooding plots, especially landowners that have a dual deer turkey objective where deer are pretty high ranking too, and they want to provide high quality summer nutrition. I'm like, yeah, let's see how this works. Let's see, this is going to be a great high protein growing season plot for your deer that are going to help in terms of antler development, body growth, supporting lactation for does, all that good stuff, but might at the same time be able to provide us some really high quality structure for turkeys. And then especially like with the buckwheat, it's very attractive to insects. I mean, you'll have pollinators
Yeah, and
all
it's
over
up
that.
so fast.
And it comes up so fast.
Yeah, the structure's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that more and more, and especially after working with the Poults, and I think I've even told you this
Well,
before.
you've influenced me too by working with the Poults, and for me to come to the facility too, and the things that you've told me, it's just like sometimes as much as it pains me to say this, I think the old field, let's just call it the Craig Harper approach, is ideal, but sometimes optimal is better than ideal, right? Like we're optimizing competing objectives, and it's a little bit of a compromise. Maybe it's not ideal, but it's good. And so I'm willing to do that if it's going to help with turkeys for people that aren't going to take the time to learn how to do all that.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about it a similar way. It may not be the optimal structure. I think that actually is yet to be seen. Maybe we can get it close to optimal. I don't know. But let's assume that it's less than optimal.
Or less than ideal was the term I used. Ideal versus optimal.
Yeah, whatever. It's still better than it being a full loss.
Yeah.
Right. Than having a field that's not usable.
Right.
So I think that's important, for us to keep in perspective and for people to think about, the amount of acreage that people would be willing to plant and achieve some breeding cover far exceeds the amount of people that are willing to give up that space, or at least in their mind they're giving it up,
right,
to dedicate it to breeding cover. There are plenty of people that are willing to do that, but there are some that aren't willing to do that on any of their acreage. And I think we'd be better served to get something usable in that landscape than to have it lost.
Yeah.
So,
and you have to recognize too that if you pay for the seed and you pay for the fuel and soil amendments and everything like that go along with planting agronomic crops, whether you're planting from breeding cover or specifically when you're planting for them for brooding cover, is just understand that over the long term, you're eventually going to have some weed problems that you're not going to be able to address without also killing your crop species. It's almost inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, you could say the same thing about food plots,
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's the problem with having a diverse mix.
Yeah.
That it limits you.
Right.
And that's one of the things that I've been thinking about when we're designing some treatments, where we can evaluate them. I mean, what a phenomenal opportunity, like we don't have to just say, oh yeah, this looks good and that doesn't look good. We can put little critters in there and see how they do. Like, I'm just so excited about having that at my disposal to try to get this data. But I've been thinking a lot about it's got to be a practical thing that's broadly applicable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, a lot of landowners can do it and it be a relatively simple recipe in terms of, what they plant, when.
Yeah, if we can't effectively replicate that and teach people how to do it, then what's the point?
Yeah, and it needs to be something that the weed control options are fairly straightforward in a lot of contexts. So I've been thinking a lot about that, but we're going to have 2 treatments that are this coming year. So I'm really excited.
Mm-hmm. So kind of getting back to your original question, another thing that just popped in my mind while we were going through that is it won't be too long before, acorns start to drop. And, we can think about mast management at that point and FSI. And for the past couple of years, I know that we've had some hardwood management episodes in the fall that seems to be really popular. And one of the things that we've
I
talked
think we're
about.
getting pressured to do that again.
Yeah.
We've gotten a
Really?
couple of, we're getting some questions about it, and we've gotten a couple of folks asking us for some more practical information about, like, I get the concepts, but I need to know how to make it happen. Like, what do I need to do?
Right. Yeah, so we're approaching a time of the year where it's good to identify which of your oaks are producing acorns. And, ideally, you would do that for several years, but generally speaking, unless it's just like a complete failure year, you're going to be able to note which trees have acorns and which trees don't. The ones that don't, if you have an objective that would be accomplished by taking that tree out, take that tree out. And to speak to those objectives, I mean, I think a lot of our listeners know, but one of them could be simply just wanting to get more sunlight on the ground because you're wanting to develop the understory in that area for turkeys. And the other might be that you're trying to increase acorn production in an adjacent good producing tree.
Mm-hmm.
So you kill the one that's interfering with it, let its crown expand out, it produces more acorns.
Well, one thing also I'm going to add, maybe a little bit off topic, but it's similar vein, and I think Craig brought this up one time when he was on here, but when, be deliberate about things to try to make things easier on yourself. And if you've got a field, I think he used the example, if you've got a field that you're just fighting sweet gum in it, and then you look around and there's several mature sweet gums around.
Oh yeah.
Those are good trees to take out.
Yeah.
Like you're letting them cast seed on an area that you're actively trying to keep them out of.
Sweet gums, maples
that'd be
would be another good one too.
Yeah, that's a great tree. And start thinking about, when you are working in these different settings and you have a recurring problem like that you're just keep hitting over and over, there may be a simple solution like that that's available to you. Just take a minute to look around and see, like, okay, why do I continuously fight sweet gum here? Oh, look, there's a parent tree right there that's casting seed on it over and over.
Right.
Well, it seems obvious right now, but we see it just over and over again where there's a problem like that. And it's like, well, you just got to kill that tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and sometimes, I fall victim to this, certainly from my perspective. Like sometimes you're just a little too close to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you overlook things, in life when you're too close to them sometimes. Yeah. And I see little things like that where a little bit of thought would have saved a lot of headache.
Yep. Ooh, I just thought of something else.
Okay.
That very, very timely. The battle against ryegrass. We're getting into that time of the year where, people are starting to think about soil prep. Mm-hmm. And you prep the soil getting on into, especially like September, you get those nice little green shoots coming right back up if you've got ryegrass in the seed bank.
Yeah.
So if if y'all have listened to us long enough, how we feel about ryegrass. We've talked about it many, many times. But if you've got a field or multiple fields that are plagued with it, it oftentimes takes several treatments, fall and spring, before you can eradicate it. So if you've got one field in particular that is bad, you might think about a month from now, going out there and disking it up and letting that ryegrass start to emerge from the seed bank. And then while it's still in that vulnerable size class, go ahead and hit it with a grass selective herbicide like clethodim.
Yep. I didn't know if we would get through it without talking about ryegrass.
Well, and another thing too, like you were talking about, make things easy on yourself. If you have ryegrass or really any grassy weed that's become particularly problematic in any of your fall food plots, like where, most people are going to have a cereal grain mixed with a clover, think about maybe leaving the cereal grain out of it this year. Maybe you may or may not up your rate a little bit on your clover. And then you can hit it with a grass selective herbicide without necessarily killing the cereal grain that you paid to plant.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great approach. The other thing I was going to add is don't forget about soil residual herbicide and how effective that can be to steer communities, and whether you're trying to go for an old field brooding cover plot or, in your food plot, that can be effective. And I would say it's more on the rare side that I see it utilized as part of the strategy.
Yeah.
But the other thing, when we're talking about evaluation, I have seen a number of landowners recently doing this, and one of them, even back in the spring, you and I saw together. If you're not quite sure, set it up. Like, let's say you're not quite sure if you need to do this in this plot or not. Go in and do it to half of it, not on the other half, or do a strip or something. And we've seen that together, and I've seen it a couple of times where people were tinkering.
Yeah.
And they tried another herbicide application, or they tried a different mix or a different seeding rate or whatever, and they had it side by side. And then you get out there and it's like, oh, well, that's obviously the way it needs to be done right there.
Yeah.
Like you're talking about those.
You're talking about those clover plots that we sprayed the ryegrass out of, and the clover just took off.
Yeah. And then I have seen that in multiple different occasions where we're standing there and I'm with the landowner and I'm looking at what they've done, and it's like, well, this is exactly what it's supposed to look like, and that looks like crap. It's not necessarily that stark, but sometimes it is, and it's like you're hitting it here. That's what you need to be doing, and this, you can see it. It's obvious.
Right.
So I think that's important for people to set up things so that you can evaluate the outcome. It's sort of like putting a cage in your food plot kind of mentality. Like it's such a strong visual cue to give you direction. Don't forget about that, especially when you're trying new things and you're not certain on how exactly things are going to respond in your context.
Yeah.
Little tinkering, little science, little wild turkey science, not going to hurt you.
Yeah. I really like that idea. Yeah, if you're not sure which of the practices to put in, I mean, we just had a landowner field tour where a landowner had done precisely that, where he was doing some old field management, and he burned a section of it, he disked a section of it, he burned and disked a section of it, and then he compared the plant responses. And it was really interesting because not every plant community on every site is going to respond to the same treatment the same way. So now he has a very accurate picture for that specific field of what it responded to best. And it's not that he's going to do that same practice in perpetuity, because it may become lopsided in the wrong direction, and now he's got to go back and use a different treatment. But at least for now, he knows where he wants to steer it and what practices are best to accomplish that.
Yeah. Well, and that, that's one thing that we have talked about, and maybe we talked about it recently on the air. The context, like the way that you manage a field or your woods and the response that you get varies a lot.
So much.
Even within a property.
So much.
And it sometimes leaves us sitting there like, dang.
Yeah.
They did it the way I thought they should.
And they should be better.
Yeah, this didn't do right. And it's, sometimes it takes some of that tinkering to figure out in your context what's going to be the most effective strategy.
Yep. I think that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Hopefully the listeners do.
Charlotte, if you could put the chapter in right here, we'll go ahead and close the show down. Well, it's like we were talking about, it's middle of the summer. It's, turkeys aren't necessarily the top of the mind for everybody, but we still have a base of listeners that are listening, and we appreciate y'all. And hopefully you're getting something out of some of these episodes where we're reflecting on our experience with landowners and talking about some of this habitat stuff. If you have comments or questions or topics, reach out to us. We always like that. We've been getting a fair amount of that continually.
Yeah, we have.
And we've been going to a lot of those topics.
Yeah,
so
we have.
If you have something that you want us to hit on, let us know. And we have quite a few in the hopper that are coming down the chute that are coming from that. So I think it's been good. It's helping us with content ideas and knowing what our audience wants and helping us stay connected with that.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely want to do that. And the other thing, we haven't had any state updates in a while.
Right.
And we also haven't done any deep dives in a while.
Right.
So if you guys have ideas for things that you'd like us to do on those, let us know. But we do have a couple in the hopper. And I'll also remind folks, I guess I didn't really realize the full extent of how long it was going to take, but the Wild Turkey Symposium is almost upon us. So we've got a bunch of research and a bunch of our research that's coming out in that, and we're sitting here anxiously waiting. We almost did one of the topics today
that we've been teasing for a long time.
I know, but I didn't realize it was going to take so long. It's going to be December before it comes out. I think as soon as it's accepted, we could, where we're nearly certain it's going to be published as it is, we could probably move forward with that. But we've got some really cool research, cutting edge research, not just from you and me, but from all of our turkey researchers that are going to be showcased here in the near future. So stay tuned.
We'll get back to the actual science, not the Will and Marcus talking about what they do out in the woods.
Yeah, well, nobody cares about turkeys right now anyway, so. All right, well, let's close it down. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Wild Turkey Science is part of the Natural Resources University podcast network and is made possible by Turkeys for Tomorrow, a grassroots organization dedicated to the wild turkey. To learn more about TFT, check out turkeysfortomorrow.org.